Welcome back, Raji. It seems that we had some little technical problems last time when we spoken, but I hopefully this time we will get to share a little bit of your story with the people here in Romania. So let's start by welcoming you, and please tell us first of all a little bit about your story. How did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Thanks, Razvan. It's interesting because what happened yesterday with the technical trouble is very much what I talk about, which is that we plan things and things don't happen the way we plan them.
Yes, yes.
So it's all meant to be the way it is, and somehow it's perfect. So we can talk about that later. So the story of who we are is always interesting. That's also very much what I talk about. So the story of my journey was basically I was a seeker all my life. I had questions about the meaning of life, why were we here, who I was, what was God. And I had a kind of a profound unhappiness within myself, which I didn't really understand. And I was looking for some kind of inner peace. I was looking to try and find contentment with myself and others, a deeper acceptance of everything in life. So up till probably my mid-30s, I was living what one would call a normal life. I studied architecture, then I worked as an architect. I had my own practice in Sri Lanka. I made money, I got recognized, I had relationships, I dabbled in all the usual things that we try as a young person. And I found that nothing was really fulfilling me at a deeper level. And then I developed a very serious illness, a skin disease, which forced me in part to stop what I was doing in my daily life and to focus on my health. And at the same time, I'd already started yoga and meditation. And I was going through a process of psychotherapy, regular sessions with a therapist, which was very interesting and helpful. So all this came together, and I started having lots of experiences, particularly because of my illness, where I wasn't what I thought I was. A lot of the beliefs of who I was started to be broken in a very extreme way, sometimes painful way, sometimes very comfortable. So I was left really not knowing who I was at all. And sometime after that, a couple of years after that, I was continuing to meditate regularly, and I used to go on silent retreats in Sri Lanka, into the hills, into a beautiful meditation center there. And during one of those retreats, I had a very strong inner calling, an inner voice, which said, go and meet Ramesh. And I discovered Ramesh was Ramesh Balsekar, who lived in Bombay. He became my spiritual teacher, my guru. And I spent 5 years regularly visiting him. I used to travel back and forth to Sri Lanka. And Ramesh gave me answers to all the questions I had. Over a period of 2 or 3 years, I asked him questions whenever I was there. And I fell in love with him as a being, as my teacher and my guru, but also I fell in love with the Advaita teaching which he shared. And then some years later, the seeking ended completely. I had no more questions. I stopped going to see him for satsangs. And there was a process of what we can call so-called awakening, which happened. And then for many years, there was no real interest in sharing the teaching. Somehow, life was fine as it was. I had discovered what I was always looking for, and more, we can say, in a way. And so for many years, there was no interest in sharing. And again, one day, spontaneously, somebody invited me to come to Malaysia to give a talk, a lady who had also been with Ramesh. And then I started regular visits to Malaysia every year, for a few weeks every year, giving talks there, and a few talks in Sri Lanka, and a few talks in India. So for the first 3 years, it was only maybe 2 to 6 weeks a year, maximum. And then, about 2 years ago, another kind of opening happened, where spontaneously, I think it was just after New Year's Eve, I had a feeling that I just had to say to the universe, use me in any way you want. And since then, more invitations have been coming. I've been talking now maybe 6-8 months a year. We travel to Europe every year now for a few months. And that's the way it's unfolded, basically. So who knows what's going to happen next? We never know what's going to happen next.
Okay. Thank you. Just a little curiosity. Was there someone in your family that has encouraged your search, or you were on your own journey separate from what was happening there? Or how did things unfolded for you?
Well, my parents were always very open-minded, I suppose, open thinkers, free thinkers. They were interested in religion and spirituality, but they never followed one particular kind. So we had books in the house about all kinds of different things. And in my teenage years, I started to take some of these. I was never really that keen on reading, but occasionally I would read about yoga or Buddhism, something else. So that, I suppose, was fruitful ground for me not to have a rigid religious or spiritual education. Although I went to a Christian school in England, we had church every day at that school. Somehow none of it really deeply resonated with me. I couldn't find the logic in a lot of the spiritual teachings, the conventional spiritual teachings. I always had doubts and questions. But whenever I asked the priests or the monks or the teachers these questions, often I wasn't satisfied by the answer. I was often left with more questions. So then I decided basically I had to find out for myself. And in a way, what the Buddha says I like, which is be a light unto yourself. So in other words, try and find the answers yourself through your direct experience. So that became my guiding light in a way, my motto, to try and find out for myself. And then when I became more seriously interested in spirituality, my family were very accepting of that, very accepting indeed. My grandfather actually, on my mother's side, had been ended his life as a Christian priest in England. Although he was born a Hindu, he ended his life as a Christian priest. And so I suppose there was some tradition in the family of this kind of deep spiritual searching.
So, given the perspective on things that you have just offered, I wonder, would be this teaching that you are giving in Satsang a better way for the mind to understand what we really are and how one can release some of the suffering, or maybe more of the suffering, and live a different life? So let me rephrase that. In Satsang, you are given answers by Ramesh, and basically that's what you're doing too in Satsang. So all these unanswered questions and all this trouble in the mind is one of the problems that people have, some of the source of the suffering that people are experiencing. What would you say to that?
Yes, very true. I think the majority of us, the suffering is in our mind. And if we're more specific about that, it's obviously the psychological suffering that's created by certain thoughts and beliefs. But also it's linked to emotional suffering, because our mind and our emotions are very much linked. So for a lot of people, they're trying to get rid of, escape from this kind of mental and emotional suffering. So just by understanding this, by the mind understanding what the suffering is, how the mind functions, what the mind is, what are thoughts, what are thought structures, what is the ego. Even just understanding this at an intellectual level brings some relief to the suffering. And that's what I saw over the years that I was with Ramesh. Thousands of people coming to him, hearing the satsangs, reading the books, some of them doing the inquiries and the investigations. Even with intellectual understanding, there was a change in their suffering. There was a lessening, a reduction in their suffering. And I found that very encouraging for myself, and even now the way I share, because then we don't have to be so focused on enlightenment, self-realization, awakening as a goal. It becomes much more practical than this particular set of pointed set of concepts. This particular teaching is then much more about how do we live our daily life in harmony with ourselves and other people. And I think that's very important at the moment, because there are so many different kinds of teachings and practices that are pointing to something in the future. Whereas I found with this fairly simple set of concepts, if the mind is ready, that means a certain amount of readiness has to be there, then the mind can understand very quickly what's happening and very quickly find some release, start to experience more peace, more happiness, more acceptance. And that's very powerful in our age, in our modern age. We're being bombarded by so many different things. It's difficult to choose or know which way to go. So that's also one of the reasons I like sharing the teaching. I find it very clear, very simple, and very direct.
Okay, thank you. You've mentioned now in your answer that having a goal can be a problem for someone who is seeking. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit? I think that would be a subject that people that want to come to Satsang could take into consideration in order to prepare themselves, let's say, a little bit better for this meeting.
So I would say, let's not worry about preparation, because that's partly what has created some of our suffering. If we look at it, our education system and our conditioning, hundreds, thousands of years old, has been telling us that we are not complete, we are not whole, we are separate from God, separate from the universe, separate from the life force, things like that. So that's why most people believe that what they're looking for is in the future. So we're taught at a very young age to have these goals, these objectives, and create an object out of it. What we're trying to point out with this Advaita teaching, these concepts, is that this idea that it's in the future is only a thought. It's only a belief. It's nothing else. And so what I try and show people in the satsangs or the workshops or retreats is that what's actually happening is we're having an experience in our daily life of what we are looking for. In other words, we already have what we are looking for. But our mind doesn't recognize it like that, doesn't understand it like that. So what we're really doing in satsang and with this teaching, these concepts, is we're helping the mind to get rid of these so-called false beliefs, false ideas. It's like a peeling away or a clearing away, lifting of the veil, it's sometimes called. And that reveals what is already here. And that, I find, needs no preparation. Everybody has access to this at any moment in their life. It's very simple, very simple. So it can happen within a situation like satsang or a retreat or a workshop, or it can happen spontaneously. And that's actually what we're pointing at, that it's happening all the time. It's just our mind doesn't recognize it because of the way we've been educated.
So I know that in our conversations together you mentioned that you also have an approach for helping people release their emotional tensions together with this mind clutter. And this, let's say, recipe, it's not a recipe, but it's a way of doing things. Would help someone go closer to the truth so that they can see clearer what is already there, as you have said. Can you tell us a little bit about this? What are you doing with the emotions? What's the way that you do things?
So the most important part of it is probably to say to welcome and accept all emotions and all thoughts as well and all beliefs. Not to try and pretend that they shouldn't be here, they don't have a place. Because the starting point is that what we are is this one life force consciousness, God. So everything is an expression of that. So even what we call negative emotions are actually an expression of this one life force. So for most people, including from my experience, we spend a lot of time trying to suppress this, or trying to negate it, trying to change it, wishing it wasn't there. And by doing that, we actually give it more power than it has. So that's part of what we do. But if we look at emotions or thoughts or sensations as kinds of energy, everything in our life is a kind of energy. It has a particular frequency. And so these energies, as they move, they can create blockages or they can create openings. So often we experience something emotionally difficult in our life, and then we have a strong belief about it. The two go together, and that creates a kind of blockage. We're hanging on to it. And specifically what we're doing at a mental level is we're either blaming ourselves or blaming the other. We're experiencing some kind of guilt or shame or some kind of self-hatred or hatred of the other. And there's also pride as well. And this might create some kind of a worry or expectation in the future. These are the core emotions that we're dealing with, which create our suffering. So by trying to understand the source of these emotions and the source of these beliefs, already we're becoming aware of a mechanism which is functioning almost automatically. It's difficult to understand at first because we're so used to believing that we're in control of what's happening. And some spiritual practices suggest that we try and control it even more to get rid of it. The path that I follow from my direct experience is that actually we have very little actual control of what's happening. And when the mind starts to understand this, it's able to let go of blaming, guilt, shame, hatred and pride, worry and expectation. But on a physical level, what I use is movement, breath, affirmations, amongst other things. We do writing exercises, we might do exercises in groups or in pairs. We might scream and shout, we might cry. Anything that can actually in some way release the energy, the emotion that's been held, locked in the body. And then afterwards it leads to a very deep acceptance that it's okay to feel like we're in this deep acceptance that all emotions are somehow okay and it's normal to have. This kind of understanding helps the mind to go deeper into an acceptance of oneself. It's in a way a form of self-love. But then when something happens in our life and we still experience, let's say, anger or sadness or frustration, we are not rejecting it, we're not blaming ourselves or blaming the other. We're in deep acceptance that this is somehow meant to happen, supposed to happen. And so then these don't get stored anymore. We don't create these blockages, so to speak, in our energetic system, in our body-mind. That's the approach I use.
Okay.
And I do it specifically because on my path I found that I was carrying a lot of these blocked emotions, and that's partly what led to my illness. And now I act as a kind of a guide counselor to people who might have illnesses, to help them to see their illness in this way, that it's actually blocked energies, blocked emotions. And also because in the Advaita teaching and the concepts and pointers, for the mind that's ready, it's very easy to accept all these things. We are consciousness, we are God, we are one life force, one energy. When the mind is ready, it's very easy to accept that. But it's not so easy to accept that we're not in control. What my teacher used to say is we're not the doers. I use the word we're not the authors of our actions. So I found, looking at people, listening to people, and then meeting people as I was sharing, this second deeper part of the acceptance of who we are was not happening because we had had a difficult situation in our life. We were hanging on to blame and guilt in particular. So the working on the emotions at the same time helps us to release that, helps us to unblock that, so the intellectual understanding can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then it becomes total understanding.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be interesting also because Advaita is a non-dual teaching, and actually that's the core of what your message is. For people here to have a better understanding of what's going on and what's happening in Satsang, because this type of meetings are not something that are common to this area, and we don't have a lot of people that are doing this thing in Romania, so it's kind of something new, and I think it would be helpful for those that want to come or consider coming to know better what is actually happening in Satsang.
Yes, lovely, thank you. If you use a different word, it's just a conversation actually. Satsang is a conversation. It's a place where people can talk about pretty much anything they want, ask any question. We try and focus the conversation around one main question, which is, who are we? Who am I? What is this? And we try and look as much as possible at all the beliefs that we have and test them from our direct experience to see whether it's actually true or whether it's just a adopted or borrowed belief. And in this moment, because everybody there is interested in the same topic, the same subject, has the same kind of curiosity, there's obviously a certain concentration of the energy. So that also helps the seeker. And so my role is really just to guide people back to what's already in themselves. Because we're born with this knowing of our fundamental nature. It's always here at all time. It's just covered up by the mind, as we said earlier. So as directly and as quickly and as easily as possible, that's what I try and do. But of course, because we're all different, because we've all had different experiences in our life, and our seeking varies somewhat from one person to the other, how we do that in the moment, there is no formula. And in fact, there are no steps. This is what's interesting if we compare these talks, these satsangs, to other spiritual practices. There's no idea that you have to be on this step to then get to that step to then get to that step. No. We're actually trying to take away this belief that there's a series of steps to recognize what's already here. So I suppose to say that, as I said earlier, people don't have to prepare. If they have any questions or if they have any experiences which they'd like to talk about, they can come with their own concepts if they want, and they can even challenge me and say you're talking rubbish. It doesn't really matter. Everything is open and everything is accepted.
that's a very good thing that you said now. I think people have experiences all the time. I agree with you. I mean, my own experience also confirms this truth, this reality. However, what I have seen, because again I have to mention this, that we don't have teachers here, we don't have so much, the information is on the internet, I know, but from what I can see, looking at a movie or having something online like a Skype conversation, which I think you also do, is a little bit different than a meeting face to face with some people that have gathered, and they have in a way the same direction, they have the same focus. So it's like this energy that is building up together with the pointings that the teacher is giving, that is helping this process of peeling off that you mentioned earlier. And it's this grace, this love, this power, this beauty that we discover in that experience that is actually moving things. I think that's what I understand from what you're saying. So it's this grace that helps peel these layers off and let us experience what we truly are. And actually, I mean, from our conversation, that would be a partial conclusion, because we cannot elaborate on things that much, that we can say things until the end, so to speak. So for someone that is coming to your satsang and wants to find the truth, what would you say that is the most important thing that they should take into consideration?
I wouldn't say that at all.
Okay.
Actually, I say very much the opposite. I say there's no truth. That everything that comes out as words, which are based on thoughts, is just a concept. And it's very, very simple when we understand it. Any thought we have has an opposite thought. Would you agree?
Yes.
So any experience we have has an opposite experience. Any state has an opposite state. Any sensation, there's an opposite sensation. So what we're pointing to with these concepts, these words, even the practices, is that what we are fundamentally is the source of all these opposites. That's why it's called Advaita, non-duality. All the opposites, infinite number of opposites, is what we call duality. That's our living experience, light and dark, male and female, etc. But the source of it all is something that's prior to or beyond this duality, these opposites. So that the word truth is simply the opposite of the word lie, for example, or untruth. So what we're trying to understand is that the truth is, the reality is, what is always present. What is always present, what is always happening, is what we are as consciousness, this one life force. And gradually the mind, or quickly, comes to the recognition that it has never been separate from this life force, separate from this consciousness, or even separate from an object in our daily life, or separate from an emotion, or separate from a sensation. In other words, what we experience is that everything that's around us, everything we're thinking and feeling, all sensations, all experiences, all states, is what we are as consciousness of life force, God. So in that sense, there can never be an untruth or a truth. Everything is what we are. Everything is reality. So part of the process that I help people with is to understand what these words mean, what these thoughts mean, what these thought structures mean. Because the mind is confused. For the most part, people are confused because they've been taught to be confused. We've all been taught to be confused. As I said, our education system, including our formal academic education system and our religious education, and our life conditioning surrounded by people, has created this confusion in the mind. But the mind has the capacity to immediately recognize what is being pointed to. Because as I said, we're already born with this knowing. This knowing is here. But the knowing that I'm pointing to is not a knowing which is intellectual. It's not a knowing which comes as thoughts. So beyond the duality of thoughts, truth and lie, real and unreal, we discover something else. We discover something else. And that discovery, we can say, is in the so-called heart. It isn't actually in the physical heart. It's in the heart of who we are, in the very depths of who we are. So then we use words again to try and point to what cannot be described in words. And this is the tricky thing. So that's why I'm very careful to say this is not a truth, because otherwise the mind gets attached to one idea and rejects all other ideas. What I'm trying to help people to recognize is our mind has this incredible capacity to stretch and stretch and stretch, and be very elastic and accept everything. And to understand that everything that's happening within ourselves and around ourselves is what we are.
Thank you. So, I would like to ask you something more, because that's a very interesting, let's say, concept, but also a truth. And the word satsang actually, from what I know, means in the light of truth. It can be translated like that. And I would like for you to emphasize on how important this felt experience that you've spoken about, this heart experience of something that we are experiencing fully ourselves, and not the understanding of the mind that is necessary for that experience to happen. So if you could talk a little bit about this direct experience that you are pointing towards in satsang, I think that would be very helpful for people that are seeing this video.
So if I may give an example of that, in our typical day, for most people, there are many moments where we have no specific thoughts. There's just a direct awareness of what's happening in the moment. So for example, we could be riding a bicycle, cooking, dancing, singing, just sitting, watching nature. Lots of these situations in our daily life. And in that moment, there's just an awareness of what's happening. In other words, the five senses are picking up information which is being passed to the brain, and there's a recognition of what's happening. What's absent in that moment is what we call the mind, which is thoughts and thought structures, is not labeling that experience. It's not describing that experience. So these five senses are active. The sixth thing, which is thought structures, is not active. So in that moment, we're in direct communion, we can say, awareness, communion, of what is happening. There's no idea of me and nature, me and the dance, me and the song. We're just in direct awareness of it, and there's no sense of separation, there's no idea of separation. So most people are actually living that quite a lot of their day. Even when we are suffering, what we call suffering, which could be mental, emotional, physical, there are gaps in that suffering. And in that gap, this is what's happening. There's just awareness, witnessing, we can call it, of what is present. So when the mind understands this from its own direct experience, it's able to relax. And what happens in that relaxation is we stop identifying, believing only that we are the suffering. We are the idea. We are the belief. And we start to recognize that what we are is this awareness, this witnessing, this recognition which is happening all the time. And eventually what we can say is the mind concludes, accepts that this awareness, this witnessing, is the ground of our being. It's always present. That is what we are. And then from that comes thoughts, thought structures, beliefs, ideas. So the identification initially shifts from believing I am this thought, I am this idea, I am this belief, into I am this awareness, I am this witnessing. And then later it goes even deeper than that, what we call prior to or beyond awareness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense for me. I hope it will make sense for those that are watching this conversation. And I would like to invite you now to leave your message for those people that want to listen to you and who would like to come to your events in Romania in May. So, I don't know, what would you say to someone if you were right now in front of him and you just make an invitation? So, what would you say to those people?
What I always say to everybody from my experience is that all of us are consciousness. And the word consciousness can also mean the one energy of the universe, life force, God, presence, love, whatever word you like. And you understand from that word it means everything that's happening for all time and space. Each one of us are already, always, and will always be that consciousness. So each one of us is absolutely perfect. We don't have to believe there's something lacking in us or missing. We don't have to believe that we're not whole. We're always perfect as we are. And this deep intellectual understanding, which can eventually lead to a total understanding, can end our emotional and psychological suffering. End it completely. And so the opportunity at any moment in our life is to realize this, what we fundamentally are.
Okay, thank you very much for the time that you have offered us today. And of course we are looking forward to meeting you in person here in Romania. So until next time, have a lovely day in Auroville, and we will see each other. There's not so much time until our meeting, so thank you very much for the thoughts and everything that you've shared with us today.
Thank you, Razvan. Thank you for the lovely questions as well, and thank you for the invitation to come there. I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to Romania, so I'm looking forward to coming.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.